I wanna take a walk around the world. Wonder would it do me any good? Till I get some money in my pocket, then I guess just have to walk around the neighborhood. But I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. Wanna be good so bad. That desire's all I ever had. Wanna take a ride up in the sky. Watch the aeroplanes just pass me by. Wanna see a little gelato and take the time to show all of these people what it means to be alive.
So yeah, I'm Austin. I think most of you know me. I know most of you. Jess asked me to speak tonight. Well, we actually talked about it a couple months ago and then had to reschedule because I had like a fishing trip. Bear with me. I have like mosquitoes all around. I'm kind of fighting them off. I have family in town, so I'm outside of the house. I have little ones, little nieces around. So, and it's also like super late for me. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of like an early to bed, early to rise kind of dude these days. So I'm gonna try to keep the energy, I guess, up and have like a bang. So sometimes when it's late, I get a little low energy, I suppose. So yeah, I'm Austin. I'm happy to be speaking with you guys today. I haven't been to one of these in a hot minute now, partially because of the time, but I did enjoy the ones that I did go to, so this is cool. I don't know if there's been like many speakers that kind of identify with the, I guess what dopey folk refer to as the alt recovery type deal, and that is I guess partially how I identify, if you had to put a label on it. So maybe it's something different, maybe it's not, I don't know, but regardless, I think most of our stories have a lot of similarities. So yeah, I guess I'll start like, I don't know, I haven't done this in a long time and I haven't prepared anything. I remember like when I was first asked to speak at a meeting few years ago, like the very first time, like I felt like I needed to like write down just like key points and stuff, and everyone told me like don't do that, do that off the cusp, and I was just like very nervous about making sure I touched on all the right things. That was very early on, and since then I've kind of just winged it. One of the reasons I like winging it, and just like one of the reasons I like speaking at a meeting and sharing my story in general, is because it's always, it almost feels like a therapy session. Even though like I'm not with a therapist, I end up, I don't know, learning something or like figuring out something about myself or my story like as I'm speaking, and that's always like a cool thing. And I like to watch other people speak because I feel like I sometimes see them come to realizations too. But anyways, yeah, so I guess like most of us, when I was a kid, I kind of always felt a little, not different, but like on the outside. Even when I had like a group of friends, like I never felt, for whatever reason, like I was on the in group. I moved around a lot when I was a kid. I was the youngest sibling of three, and my sibling, like my brother and sister, are significantly older than me. So I was like the baby, and teenagers were above me. So I kind of like, I don't know, I always more identified with people older than myself, which maybe like later got me more in trouble. But people younger than myself, or not younger, my age, I kind of always like felt a little outside of, for whatever reason. And I remember like feeling that way and kind of always looking for things to feel like get outside of myself. Oh shit, if my Wi-Fi goes weird, somebody let me know. I can switch over to a hotspot. I just got some kind of notification about my connection. Um, so yeah, I mean, I was raised in a pretty like normal family. Both of my parents are like still together and stuff. I mean, other having time. Cool. All right. So, anyways, I don't know where I got kicked off, but moved to Atlanta when I was like middle school ish. And I kind of started getting involved in like church, the Methodist church. Like it was just somewhere where I kind of like had friends from school that were going to, and my family kind of like we always went to like church on Sundays and stuff like that. Always like the Methodist church, and so I really got involved with that pretty intensely. But even then, like I always felt still a little different, like being in the South, and like a red state, and also being like in a church, like even though like I, subscribed to some of the things that were in there, I also like even from a really young age, like in sixth and seventh grade, felt like there were a lot of things that I couldn't like identify with myself. And I had like a lot of struggles with that early on. And then I also like remember kind of as I was getting older, I guess like looking back, kind of rewinding a minute, I remember like fifth grade, we had the DARE class and stuff. And I always just kind of talk about this because that's like the first time I really got like interested in drugs. DARE didn't turn me off to anything. It really like piqued my interest. There were a lot of things that I heard that didn't scare me as much as they like intrigued me, and I'm sure a lot of people can kind of relate to that. And I remember like when I went into sixth grade, we had like free access to the library, and I was really excited to like be able to check out like all the drug books. Like there was a heroin book, and there was a acid LSD book, and like I was just stoked to be able to like read about all that stuff. And I never really thought that was weird. I don't know, like looking back, like I feel like that is not the usual thing. But maybe it is for some of us. But I just remember like always having that interest, and then also like hanging around with a lot of people that like never thought twice about that. Um, and so even from a young age, like I always felt like I had some like dichotomy, like in a weird way, I was like living two lives. Like whether that was like a very minor thing about like my interests compared to other people's that I hung out with interests, or like later like certain behaviors. Like most of my friends and like people that I hung out with were people in the church. Like I said, I got pretty involved, and by the time like I was a freshman in high school, music was always a big part of my life, and I picked up like guitar and drums and percussion at a pretty young age. And like I sing and stuff, so I started getting involved with like the youth band, and became like the worship leader for the youth group in the church. And like later in high school was doing that like as my internship for this work study program or whatever. And so I was always like very involved in like helping plan retreats and stuff, but I was also like sometimes like going and smoking weed on like in behind the dumpster in the parking lot of the youth building, or like taking mushrooms on the choir tour. And there was always like just this like other side of me that I kind of always like hid. Like there I was never like doing that with other people that I was hanging out with. Like there were other friends that I had, and like hung out with them basically just to like do drugs and stuff. But like the people that I like really bonded with, like that was they had no idea. And I always like thinking back think about like how I was kind of in all these different aspects of my life in different periods, like living two lives. And I definitely don't have like a multiple personality disorder, like dissociative identity disorder or anything like that. But I think about that in relation to like if any of you are familiar with like psychology, like when somebody has DID, the goal of like therapy and a lot of therapies, depending on like the therapist, is to like integrate those personalities. And I think about like when I look back and see like different like dichotomies of like my life and where I am today, and how like I feel like I've kind of integrated those parts of my life. And a big part of that for me is like not having shame for who I am, and how I live my life. But anyways, so yeah, like I always kind of kept like my partying, so to speak, and getting high like off to the side until I went to college. I had some like issues my senior year with my friends in the church, and like I was dating this chick that, you know, was in the same youth group. Like I said, like we were all like, all my friends were in the youth group. Um, and then, you know, like we were dating for like 2 years, and then, you know, we broke up. It was stupid high school shit. Like she needed a break to know who she was before we went to college, like who she was herself. And then like 2 weeks later, she was dating like my best friend in the church, the drummer of like the band that I was in. And like in that age, dude, like that kind of thing, like when you're 17 or 18 and a dude like that, at least a sensitive dude like myself, like that really just like hits you to the core. And I kind of like felt betrayed in a lot of ways. And like I said, all of my friend group and kind of my whole life was tied up in this very specific group. So that kind of gave me an opportunity when I decided to get out of that little friend group, with that kind of being the impetus to find a new friend group. And that like really led me down a very different path. And so that was right around my freshman year in college. And very quickly, it was just very much like, you know, partying. I always put that in quotes because for me, I spent very little time at the party. Like I always kind of looked forward to going home and like getting stoned or like getting fucked up like with myself or like a couple different people. Part of that's just being an introvert. Like I'm a social dude, but like I gotta have like my time or like with a few friends. But you know, I didn't go to class much. I kind of like started dabbling with more kind of intense substances, I guess. Again, from a young age, like psychedelics intrigued me like to no end. I mean, in middle school, I was reading like all beatniks and shit. Like that was just what I was into, hippie culture and beat culture. It intrigued me before I ever like tried any substance. And so when I kind of like got into this space of college, like I had tried psychedelics in high school and stuff, but it was really a whole new world for me. And, you know, this first go around at Georgia Southern was not a lot of time in class, like I said. And then, you know, it was fun, just psychedelics and stuff until I started kind of dabbling in opiates. And it was mostly just like when I would come home for like weekends or Thanksgiving breaks and stuff, I would get like Roxy's or Percocet. Um, and it never really was like a thing where I even had the ability to develop a habit. But I kind of always knew in the back of my mind, like if I had like a solid access to these things, like I would definitely like feel like I could do so much more on them, and I did for a while. Um, and so my sophomore year in college, making sure there's no little ones behind me. So like college was pretty much like all the same shit, very little class. I ended up on academic probation, which is like not um, like me in terms of like, you know, test scores and stuff, but I just didn't give a shit, frankly, and all I cared about was changing the way I felt. Um, so the end of my sophomore year in college, I got a root canal. And the first cavity that I ever had, I got like a filling my freshman year, and like literally a year later, it was fucked again. So I got a root canal, um, and that root canal kept hurting, and Mind you, like I had already been dabbling in opiates, so kept hurting, and I had like a nice script of Vicaprofen, actually, not Vicodin, Vicaprofen initially. I remember that, and I also remember, so it stayed hurting, and 2 weeks later I had to go back, and they retreated it. I had like extra nerve canals in the tooth and stuff, so they retreated it, did another root canal, um, and then sent me home with more meds. And I remember like filling the script and like looking at the bottle, and it went like the doctor went from 5 to 7.5. And I just remember like saying like, oh fuck yeah, Doctor so and so. Like I didn't know who he was, but like I was stoked about that. I was in pain, but I was stoked about that. Which like should have kind of tipped me off. But again, like I feel like I was kind of always aware of, where I stood with opiates in particular, and at that time I didn't really care. So I went home. It was like the end of my sophomore year. It was literally like finals week or the week before finals week that I actually got the root canal. And I went back home to Atlanta, and I was still in pain to the point that like I was throwing up a lot of the day. Like I was spending a lot of time on the bathroom floor. It wasn't just like a toothache. It was pain that I hadn't experienced before. And so I started having to like go to other doctors. I went to an oral surgeon who extracted the tooth. Kept going back to him, and he was treating me for like dry socket and different things, and eventually turned me away. Told me I was drug seeking, and like I was, to like fix my pain because I was legitimately in pain, but I also knew like that I liked the medications. And so like more doctors and more doctors, and I finally got a diagnosis of trigeminal neuralgia, atypical trigeminal neuralgia, which, like if you Google the suicide disease, it'll come up as trigeminal neuralgia. People kill themselves with it. I was on like support groups and stuff where a good 6 to 8 people every 6 months to a year would be out of the group because they had off themselves. So, I mean, all that to say, like, it really wasn't a good time in my life, and it just progressively got worse. But it also opened up like a really solid line for like some strong pain medication. But it was never strong enough, and I started like getting stuff from the streets because I already had people that I knew. And then within a few months I was using like IV pills, and a few months after that I kind of transitioned to IV heroin, along with all my medications, and that really went on for years. I went back to Georgia Southern for my junior year, and then took medical leave because I just wasn't able to go to class. I wasn't able to really deal with anything. And I was spending a lot of time like running out of pain medication and like trying to figure out how to get more, from doctors and from other people. And so I really didn't have any other choice but to take medical leave, and I stayed down there for like a month or two after taking medical leave. My parents came down to like help me with something, and like they saw me and I was just like skin and bone, and they were like, "You're coming back up." At the time I was like with this girl, Megan, who I was with for a while before I got sick, and she stuck with me for a long time. Like she was really, like if I'm like honest with myself, probably a big reason that like I'm still here in terms of like the support, and just like having somebody that was there for me and like with me. I mean, I had my family, but I didn't really have a life after so many months other than like procuring opiates from doctors and old friends from high school who were like maintaining their habits. And then that just progressed to like copping in the bluffs of Atlanta. And most of my time was just spent uh, like in mine and Megan's apartment after I came back to Atlanta. And like Dave always says, like that period of his life, he was like a house plant. That was literally me, for probably 7 or 8 years. And there was a period where, I was on a lot of fucking pain medication prescribed, like kind of as far up as you can get, like fentanyl patches, Opanas, Dilaudid, and all that to say that like my tolerance was just to where, I mean, doctors said like we don't have anywhere else to go. And I remember me and Megan had taken like this trip to Myrtle Beach. Like we had saved up a little bit of money. We both worked at Medieval Times as servers, which is fun and funny. But we saved up a little bit of money and went to Myrtle Beach. And mind you, Megan's like a total normie, like smoked weed like twice or three times with me and never liked it. But always sticking with me and not really understanding like what I was going through outside of the pain that I was experiencing. So we went to Myrtle Beach, and on the way there, like I pretty much did most of the dope and the medication that I had that was supposed to get me through the weekend. And so we got there, and I remember thinking, because our hotel room was like on the 8th or 9th floor. I remember thinking like, I'm going to be sick, and I don't know if I trust myself being that high up with like a balcony and stuff. And I actually like voiced that to her, and I could kind of like see in her face, like she didn't quite, like that was surprising. Like she didn't, I guess, understand or think that I was like at that place. And again, like she really didn't understand like the gravity of my situation in terms of outside of trigeminal neuralgia, but my dependence and addiction to opiates and benzos. They gave me benzos because they have anti-seizure qualities, and that's supposedly good for nerve pain. And then that became a whole other thing, which also became anxiety. So they gave me benzos for nerve pain, and then I started taking benzos for anxiety, and more. So anyways, like the night that we checked in, I was like, I can't do this. We're going to have to go home. And that still like fucks me up to think about, like, cause that was going to be like a good trip. And like, I just completely blew it. And I texted my parents from like the bathroom, like while I was like shooting dope, and trying to like tell them where I was at with my habit and stuff, but I couldn't ever like bring it to like fully explain what was happening. I don't remember what I said, probably just like I'm taking too much of my medication and it's not working and this and that. And like in all honesty, some of my family, I think like the TN was real, trigeminal neuralgia, and it sucked. It still sucks, but there were other issues there, being, my substance use disorder. And I think like sometimes that is denied because it's easier to like brush off on the pain. And that, it's just easier for families sometimes. And I get that. But I was trying to kind of like let them know where I was at with the medication, and wasn't fully honest. And we drove back home the next day, and I was like, I had this plan, like I wasn't gonna like cop anymore. I wasn't gonna take anything that wasn't prescribed. But at the time, like in my mind, there was no way like I couldn't take any medication at all. And so we went back, and then like I had a pain management appointment, or like I scheduled a new pain management appointment. And that's actually like I went there and was kind of like upfront about like, look, this isn't like cutting it for me. And basically the result was like upping my medication, and that's when actually they added the fentanyl patches. It was just like oxy and Dilaudid. And so that really just kind of like it fixed it for a little bit. Like I stopped like going elsewhere for other stuff because like it like satisfied the tolerance for a bit. But that lasted like a few months, and like Megan knew that I had been getting pills, is what she knew of, from other people outside of like what was prescribed, and she knew that I was like going to stop. And I made that a decision, and made that known to her. And then I don't know, probably 8 or 9 months later, she like I was nodded out on the couch, passed out, and she woke me up, and she had gone through my phone and like saw that I was texting like a dope boy and stuff. And so like we had words, and I tried to deny it, and she was like, we're done. And we were engaged, like it was a big thing. And I went home that night, like I couldn't drive home. I remember calling my mom to come pick me up, and that was our apartment, so I just had to go back to my folks' place. And the next day, like I went and like had really no like desire. I don't know if I was suicidal, but I really didn't care if like I woke up. And so I went and copped and did some dope in the CVS parking lot that I got the rigs from, and I overdosed for like the second time. But I was out for like a while, and when I came to, I had been Narcaned by a lady, just a random lady, and she like carried, it was naloxone actually, it wasn't Narcan, but she carried naloxone. She explained to me like later, I have a very vague memory, but that her son had overdosed multiple times. And I to be honest don't know if like he was alive or dead at the time. I just remember her saying that like her son had overdosed and that she always carries naloxone. And she didn't even call paramedics, which knowing what I know now wasn't the best move, but like I think about her a lot, and really she's a big reason for what I do today, because it wasn't like a paramedic, and it was just somebody on like in the parking lot of a CVS. And I remember it was weird because it was Friday the 13th, 2013, which just seems a little interesting because I looked at it as like really bad luck on Friday the 13th, but today I look at it as like a really fortunate thing in my life. Anyways, to fast forward, like I had like gone through all this shit for TN, like started getting these laser treatments when Megan actually like set up like this GoFundMe and like a 5K. She really did like a lot for me and raised money to get me to this laser treatment in Myrtle Beach. And it was helpful, but they told me then like you're not gonna notice any relief until you get off pain meds, and I pretty much laughed in their face. And then so she actually got in contact, and then later my dad got in contact with a lady who lived in Boca Raton, whose daughter had TN and was totally cured, like at the laser place in Myrtle Beach. So she was opening up her own place down here, and pretty much told my Megan and my dad, like, if you can get him down here, I'll treat him for free, like as long as he needs it. So after me and Megan split, like I really didn't have a reason to be in Atlanta anymore. I didn't like it in general anyways. Didn't like it for a long time. She was kind of the only reason I was there. So I picked up and moved to South Florida. And I had no idea like at the time that Palm Beach County was like treatment capital of the world and shit. Like I was completely oblivious even for like the first 4 or 5 years down here, like that there was recovery here, like that was a thing. I was just kind of in my own world. I slowly like stopped using stuff that wasn't prescribed. It was like a process for me. And like, from time to time down here, I would get stuff, but it became more of just a prescribed thing. But again, like I was a houseplant, like I got on disability, I was going nowhere in life. And I was just miserable. I mean, I spent a lot of time in pain. I spent a lot of time doing nothing. And when I was like 27, I think it was like October or something, I saw on Facebook, which was weird because like I had blocked Megan for my own reasons and like sanity, but she, I guess, had a new Facebook, and I saw that she had gotten married. And like that sent me into like this downward spiral. Even years later, it was like 2013 when we broke up, and that was like 2017. And I only like bring her up because she's a big part of my story, and really she's like, her getting married, when I think back, was a big like impetus to me like getting to the point where I had to make a change. So that really did send me into a downward spiral. And like the weird thing was that summer 2017, I had like weaned myself down from like half. I was taking like half the medication that I had been taking, except for the fentanyl patch. And a large part of that was like Florida became a medical marijuana state. And I mean, I was smoking weed the whole time anyways, but like I then had access to other like more legitimate medication. Um, and so I started weaning myself down. And then when and I got pretty far, but I was like stashing away everything that I didn't take because I wasn't open with my doctor about it. Um, and I didn't have anything in my mind like, yeah, I'm going to take this later. It was just, I don't know, just stashing them away. And then when October, came around and I saw that she had gotten married, like kind of an unconscious thing, like it just like sent me into a spiral, and I started taking more medication than I had in a few years, started seeking out substances elsewhere again, and just kind of spiraled really quickly. And by January, I mean, when you talk about the anxiety, like I was taking a lot of benzos anyways. I had multiple seizures from benzo withdrawal. Sometimes just like if I didn't take enough benzos, I would like seize. And there wasn't anything in between for me. Like I was like literally like rocking back and forth, an anxious mess, or like nodded out and passed out. And so, I didn't have much of a choice in my mind, but to like go to detox and get off of everything. Like I knew it may be painful, like I was still in pain, but I really didn't know like how much pain was what. I knew about opiate precipitated pain and all of that. So I went to detox. I went to detox in Nashville because I knew by then that detoxes in South Florida could be sketchy, and I had like Medicare, and Medicare is not very great for substance use stuff. So when I got into detox, like they suggested that I use buprenorphine because of the trigeminal neuralgia, and it's kind of a gold standard of treatment. And I was on opiates for close to 10 years and never a day without. There were times where I was sick for sure because my tolerance, but I never didn't have anything, literally ever. And the day I went into detox, I got all my medications filled. Like really all my consequences were internal, not external by the time like I went in. I mean, I had other consequences, obviously, like losing relationships, having close calls with the law and all that. But by the time like I was ready, it was all just like me being miserable, and sick and tired of like going nowhere. I was really having like a quarter life crisis, I guess, because a lot of people that I grew up with and that were around me like were in all these places that I figured I'd be, and I was nowhere. So detox was miserable. There was pain, and like everybody knows how that is. And I got out, and frankly, like I struggled for a little bit about like being on MAT and stuff. I could reason like, yeah, like there's pain and all that, but like I wanted to like do the thing and work steps and stuff. And I was really fortunate. Like I got linked up with this guy named Matt, who's like my best buddy now. I work with him, but like he just from the get-go, he was working at the time for the agency I work at now. I wasn't like a client or anything. I happened to be where he was like meeting with other clients, and we just kind of hit it off. And so we started kind of hanging out, and I asked him to sponsor me after going to a few meetings, and like he took me through the steps. And at that time, like he was on an abstinence-based program, but he was like very harm reduction minded, and really held the belief that the steps are for anybody and everybody that wants to seek them and wants to seek recovery. And that was huge for me. And we, kind of together started this meeting in Palm Beach County. There was like this single meeting in Virginia that we like found some like readings for, and the readings were terrible and like super stigmatizing, and the meeting had already fizzled out. But it was called Mara and Medication Assisted Recovery Anonymous. So like we picked it up and we started this meeting in Palm Beach County, and it was like a big outlet for me because like I went to AA, and that's the program like Matt took me through, and that was very useful for me. And I found meetings where like I didn't hear bullshit that like really made me feel delegitimized, and I went to meetings where I did. But like I always had this group of people in a meeting to fall back on that really were always there to tell me and remind me like I'm doing good, like I'm doing the right thing. I always had validation. Matt never like made me feel like I needed to question where my recovery was at. And so I like just used buprenorphine for like a few months, and the pain was like a lot less after getting off opiates. Like all the treatments and shit that I went through helped, and medical professionals were right about not noticing it until you get off opiates. What do you know? But it was still there, and like having the support and like the validation of knowing like that recovery isn't like this one thing. I made the decision to utilize cannabis again. I still had my card, and all of that. So I did, and within a month I started going back to school. I started pursuing like other things that like gave me some sense of fulfillment other than like just going to my outpatient and going to groups, because that's all I was doing. I was going to like meetings and groups to the extent that like the outpatient place told me like you can only come to one group a week, because you got to go out and do other things. And so I did, and I started getting involved with harm reduction work just like as a volunteer. Started exchanging syringes out of the back of my car, like my trunk and stuff. And that really gave me a lot of fulfillment in a lot of ways, because when I was using the people that I would use with, I would always try to like give them rigs if I had them, like, and I was kind of always like trying to be the harm reduction minded person before like harm reduction was the buzzword it is now. And I don't know, like I can't speak enough about like the support that I had, because if I really look back and like if I only had the people that I had in certain like rooms of AA who were like gonna kind of like make me feel invalidated, and I didn't have the people in my ear telling me keep going, like what you're doing counts and what you're doing matters and you're making huge strides, I wouldn't be where I am today. Like I would have probably just like figured this really isn't worth doing if I can't do it right without doing it exactly like everybody else. And so I tell Matt like almost every week, probably anytime we have some kind of like meeting or something, like how much it means to me and how like important it was for my recovery that he was there in my ear, uh, cheering for me and rooting me along. Even him coming from an abstinence-based recovery, he never like had that mindset that I needed to do it like him. And I'm eternally grateful for that. And so I always try to like take the opportunity to be that for other people wherever I can. And I think that's really important to kind of keep in mind, just because, without that, it's easy to just fall back. Like if I can't do it right without doing it like everybody else, then why do it at all? And I can say like it works for me. Like I still utilize cannabis. I got off buprenorphine, and then I had a hernia surgery and got back on it again, and I got off it again, Really wasn't all that difficult for me doing it like with medical supervision. I tapered and I used Sublocade the second time. It was kind of a breeze. I know some people may have different experiences, but like again, without that, to kind of like get me where I was, I never would have gone to school like within 6 months. I never would have started going back to school that quick without buprenorphine, having been on opiates the way I was for so long. So all of those things were like huge tools. And today, I'm pursuing a degree in social work, hopefully going for a PsyD after that. Still working as a peer support specialist at the agency, the harm reduction and peer support agency where Matt worked when I met him. And, I work with him. We work alongside each other now, which is awesome. And recently got like a promotion to program manager where I'm managing an entire harm reduction program. It's the RAD program, Resilience Against Drug Deaths, which is pretty rad, pun intended. But like it's hard for me to like hear. I'm not like trying to get on a soapbox here, but I just want to reiterate like I'm like in a really good place, and I don't think like I could be in a better place by doing my recovery any differently. And I benefited hugely from working the steps, being on buprenorphine when I worked the steps, utilizing cannabis when I worked the steps. I still benefited from it, and I don't feel like it hindered me in any way by being able to do that. It's kind of comes down to my relationship with any substance. And, like I had a time where my relationship with cannabis was not good. I remember like there were times in college where like I like sold shit for weed, which sounds silly, like later being like, addicted to heroin. But like I had an unhealthy relationship with cannabis, but that doesn't mean today, like that I smoke weed every day and can't go without it. I utilize it to benefit me, and I find benefits from it. Matt, his harm reduction is abstinence. Like I always try to touch on that because identifying on both sides, I think like a lot of times people want to pit it against each other and act like they're like two mutually exclusive things. But, if any of us feel that we can't use any substance without, using all substances, abstinence is harm reduction. That's the way that those of us who identify that way reduce our harm, whereas those of us who maybe utilize specific substances, including medications, they do so in the same way, and that's their harm reduction. And I just like to point that out because I feel like we can all just be one big happy family and approach recovery together without like trying to pit ourselves into corners or little cookie cutter things. But anyways, like I've been talking for a while. I mostly don't know what I've said and what I haven't said. It's super late for me, but it's cool. Like I am pretty stoked to be able to like talk to you guys. Sometimes I'm think like I wish I prepare more. Other times like it goes well, but I don't know. I appreciate you guys being here, and Dopey has been a huge deal for me. Like, even though I don't come to a lot of the Zoom things anymore, it's mostly just out of like me being hella busy. But like, I've received a lot of support from Dopey. I've made friends that, I've shared things with that I wouldn't share with a lot of my friends that, I know locally. And I love that there are people here who, can accept everybody and acknowledge like we're all working towards the same thing, and that has nothing to do with substances. It has nothing to do with what we do or don't put in our bodies. It has to do with the way we live our lives. That's sobriety to me. That's recovery to me. I could not drink and be an absolute dick, and not use any substance and be an absolute dick, and that's not sobriety to me. Or I can utilize tools that work for me, and that's my recovery. And I don't know, I think we can all coexist and be happy for each other. But anyways, thanks for listening. I love all of you, and I am very happy to finally get to do this. I know it was kind of a minute to try to reschedule and schedule again, but thanks, guys.
I wanna take a walk around the world. I wonder what it do me any good. Till I get some money in my pocket, then I guess just have to walk around the neighborhood. But I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. Wanna be good so bad. That desire's all I ever had. Wanna take a ride up in the sky. Watch as aeroplanes just pass me by. Wanna see a deer, gelato, take the time to show all of these people what it means to be alive. I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. Wanna be good so bad. That desire's all I ever had. My shadow's getting smaller and smaller, and it's hiding where I stand. Shadows getting smaller and smaller, it's hiding where I stand. Wonder would it pay any mind? Leave this busted city far behind. I'll take the high road, however far away.